Okay, welcome back. This is number 28, I think, of the Derech Hashem exposition with Site or Jewish Education in Manchester, Kesher, and we're doing Rabbi Mordechai Goodman's book, The Way of God, which is kind of like a dictionary of all Jewish philosophy. We're really far into we're about to finish the first of four sections. There's four volumes within this book, and we're about to finish the first one. So if you've just joined us now, it's definitely good to roll back because we're really far into the first section. Or just join us for the beginning of the second if you want. But what we're going to do today is really important. Last time we discussed how everything physical is actually attached to something spiritual. You cannot divorce spirituality from anything physical because physicality is merely a reflection or ramification of spiritual encoding in a different domain. That's essentially what we did last time with the analogy with a boat, with a chain and the anchor at the end. If you pull on the anchor, you're going to be moving the boat in a different domain or sphere. It is not separable. It isn't as if the boat offloaded junk and now there's a barrel at the bottom of the ocean. You shake the barrel, it doesn't attach to the boat. This is attached via a chain to the boat. Everything we do physically is attached. This has massive ramification. Coming back to this diagram that I've got here, which I keep showing you, we've got this full world structure. Over here, very importantly, is the koichos, the primordial forces, which are diagrammatically represented as spinal columns. For good reason, because this is what we need. We need a spinal column because a spinal column is the clump of all the data roots, the nervous roots, the chain of command, the train tracks that the angels can go up and down on. And it's them that transduce the data that's being sent to them into things in the physical world. Now, that is what we call top-down hashgacha klolis, general providence. We're going to talk about this all the way through the second section. The whole second volume of the book is only about interface. And interface is known as hashgacha. So this top-down is called determinism. There are three main things God uses to determine how life exists on any planet, anywhere in the universe. One is genetics, two is environmental issues, and three is horoscopy, how the stars line up for that particular place and the effect that the stars and the planets have on that particular planet. That's called general interface, okay, which is why we've got the stars there. And it's got Saturn and the Sun and a comet or something going on there, cartoon-wise. Now, very important. Almost everything is green arrow down. Almost everything. But outcome of human or free will, free volition, has a bottom-up indeterministic influence. The Hebrew terms for this is hashgacha klolis, general providence, and hashgacha spechiris, influence done by free-willed creatures. English, deterministic, indeterministic. Now what this makes is a circuit. This is extremely important Jewish idea. All the influences that are coming down, then we are meant to reflect back up in a good way. How do we know we're doing it in a good way? Because we're given a manual. And the manual says, do this with these items at that time and you'll be doing the best that you can. If you do that, you keep the system good and in a good functioning order, like a car that's well serviced. If you put bad indeterministic influences up into the system, it damages the nervous system, which then has a knock-on effect in the next green arrow that comes down, not coming down correctly. This is what leads to evil or bad in the world manifesting and promulgating. It's an extremely important idea. Let's turn to page 79. We're on section 1, chapter 5.3. Whatever print of the book that you've got, you'll always be able to find section 1, chapter 5.3. Please do look into a text to follow in with this. It's really, really important for these bits. Actually, I think we've done point 3. I think we're about to start point 4. So let's go into point 4. So we're section 1, chapter 5.4. According to this principle, every physical phenomena originates amongst the forces. As we discussed last time, there can't be a physical thing on earth that isn't an outcome of something spiritual. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. No music is going to come out of a speaker unless the MP3 file or the CD, whatever you've put into the system, has that encoded on it. There is, however, an exception. Something that's in the system which isn't on the CD, which isn't on the MP3 file. And that includes all things that depend upon human free will. If you've decided you're going to do a good or bad deed, that wasn't encoded on the system. the parameters for you to make that choice were. So if it's having a bacon sandwich, the idea of a sandwich, the idea of bacon, the idea of edible pigs, the idea of eating, the idea of a sandwich, the idea of you digesting it, the idea of tasting it, are all encoded. But your decision to have it knowing that you shouldn't, that's not encoded. That's your influence. You're a player. You're one of the players in the system. There's only two players, really. There's God and humanity. They're playing the chess, right? But the board and the chessmen are all laid out by God. He invented the game. He invented the system. And he invented the rules and the moves. How you move your bishop or your knight to where? That's on you. That's on you. God willed that humans should be able to choose freely between good and evil, which means they have to recognize both and understand it, and therefore made humans absolutely independent in this respect. Humanity was thus given the power to influence the world, its creatures, in any way it desires. You want to raise cows and kill them, you can do that. You do what you want. You can raise trees, do whatever you want. Here's the world, work with it. I'm giving you a planet to work on. The world, therefore, contains two opposite general influences. The first is that of natural green arrow top-down determinism, while the second is red arrow bottom-up indeterminism. Makes a circuit, right? Remember, God responds to the red arrows, and then we respond to his green ones. So we're kind of like in conversation or relationship with the influences that are coming up and down, like being on a telephone call. You respond to the sounds that you hear with more sounds. But both of you on the other end are beyond that. You're really dealing with the will of each person, but you're communicating, right? The deterministic influence, which is top-down, right, known as tivus muchrachas, literally the natural influence, is directed downwards from on high, while the indeterministic influence, which is bechiris, which is an outcome of human free will, is directed upward from below. And this is because the deterministic influence stems from the highest forces, and it's directed towards our material world, where we're going to call that down, while the indeterministic influence, on the other hand, is a result of our free will going into the spiritual world. We're going to call that up, for want of a better. It's not really up or down, it's into the spiritual domain or from the spiritual domain. Yeah? Since both man and his actions are physical, that's all that's ever required of us. The only direct influence that humans can have is on physical things, which is why God, as we said last time, God only ever tells us, interface is something physical. Do this physical activity. Don't do that physical activity. Or do it, but don't do it at that time. Like eating. Eat on Shabbos, don't eat on Yom Kippur. Because of the linkage, so important, because of the linkage between the physical world and the highest forces, however, every time a physical thing is influenced in space or time, whatever it is, it must have an effect on its counterpart among the forces. Since human deeds in the world below are what influence these forces on high, man's influence is said to be directed upwards because it's red arrow going bottom up, right? It's thus the exact opposite of the natural deterministic influence, which is green top down. It's necessary to know, however, that even man's deeds are not all the result of his free will. While this is true of most of his actions, there are some that result from a divine decree to reward or punish him. That'll be discussed at great length throughout the entire second section. You might want to, if you want to jump ahead, jump to page 115, third line, which is section 2, chapter 3.4. Such decrees take place in the same manner as any other natural phenomena like wind, where the influence is directed downwards from the highest form. It's deterministic. If God says, I want to put you in a particular place to reward or punish you for something, then that's a deterministic influence. You're just an outcome, like an animal. You're just being influenced to be in a place. What changes us from being an animal is that we have true volition. We can make moral, ethical choices based upon a higher edict. Animals can obey their instincts. Nevertheless, even in such cases, the elements resulting from the individual's own free will are directed upwards in the manner discussed earlier. Very, very, very slippery sentence, this. So probably the most difficult sentence to understand maybe in the whole book. So let me give you 1 minute of just if you have been put in a situation where you didn't want to be, It was against your will. It was against your volition. God put you in a place. You were flying to New York for a wedding, and there was a bird strike, and the captain said, we've got to divert to Reykjavik. We've got to land there, clean the engine, or put you onto another plane for safety's sake. You didn't want to be in Reykjavik. You had no plans on being in Reykjavik. You wanted to be in New York, right? Now, when you're there, you'll say, well, I'm in New York at God's decree. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to get to, my volition was to be in New York. Now I'm in Reykjavik. That doesn't mean that while you're there, you've lost free will. You can't say, well, everything that happens to me now is deterministic. No, now you're going to go be a good person and make the right moral ethic choices in Reykjavik, right? The fact that you were in Reykjavik, not because of your will, doesn't in any way change the fact that you have volition in that place. That's all he means by that. Let's start point 5. So we're section 1, chapter 5.5. God arranged things so that every matter falling within the realm of man's free will should be able to affect the transcendental forces through this indeterministic influence according to the measure and degree set forth by God. That means everything you do that goes up the red arrow can have an effect to the actual code. Now, the way I like to... Do you remember those CDs you could buy called Rewritable? There were a CD and they got RW on. You could put them in your computer and you can have, like, I don't know, a code on it. Then you can reburn another code on it. The koiches, the forces are rewritable to an extent. So even though they say this should be happening, if humans do a particular behavior, it can rewrite the code to a certain extent. That's what God has allowed. According to the measure and degree set forth by God, how much you can write it, how many times, etc., are also rules set up. But you can influence the actual highest sources. This is true not only of man's deeds, but even of his speech and thoughts. Saying lashon hara against someone, slandering someone in perjury, saying onas devarim, hurtful, slanderous words, that can affect the koiches as well. The amount and degree of this influence, however, cannot exceed the limits decreed and circumscribed by the highest wisdom, which means there's a fair usage policy on creation. There's only so much evil you're allowed to do. There's a cap in order not to disbalance creation. We're going to discuss that on page 115 quite a bit more, but I think we've already touched upon it, possibly with this diagram here, with this graph. There's a certain cap, a threshold, that when it's reached will trigger a result. That's a fair usage policy. God will not allow things to get out of hand, but within the scope of how much they're allowed to work, then that's okay, it's down to you. Let's just finish off with point 6. Every indeterministic, red, bottom-up influence also results in a new, green, top-down, deterministic influence. God will respond to you. You make a chess move, the pawn or the bishop goes there, and he goes, right, let's move my queen or my rook over there. He'll respond to you. All these processes, however, follow many detailed laws as decreed by Hashem as being best for creation. Both the ways through which man's influence reaches the highest forces and the manner in which the forces react all depend upon many factors. What you did, what influence you did is going to change how God's going to respond, right? But there are rules. All this constitutes the deep mystery of how God's providence works and brings about everything that was and will be. Providence is a bad translation. Providence is a translation of the word hashgacha. There is no English translation. The English translation of hashgacha would be oversight, interface, supervision, and interaction. It's all those words together. Anything where God's involved in oversight, interface, supervision, or interaction. He's overseeing, he's making sure things are running, he's changing things, he's pulling levers. That's all hashgacha. Anytime God interfaces with anyone but himself is called hashgacha, which is translated into English as providence. I think that's a Christian term. It's translated as providence, like some kind of oversight. But it's more than that. It's much more than providence. It's all those things. If you go into a restaurant and it has a kosher certification, then it's under someone's supervision. That means hashgacha. The actual say, under whose hashgacha is this restaurant? Okay, you're saying who's supervising this? Who's overseeing it? Who's going to do something if there's a problem with the utensils or the food? Who's going to go there and change things and rectify it? All that is the word hashgacha. And really, we're lining up for the next section now, which is all about hashgacha. So there we are. We've finished our next, that's at 28, I think it is. What we're going to do next time is talk about how good and evil are actually rooted in the spiritual realm and how far evil goes up and what that means in our definition of good and evil. I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much for being here. Well done, and I'll see you then.